and of becoming whole. It's not accidental that the garden remains an ideal not only of earthly paradise, but also of a yearned-for tranquility, where the landscape is not a mere object, but profoundly a subject. And that is the case not only in Western art, but throughout the art of the world, certainly religious art in Asia. The now humble landscape painting, banished to the outer regions of amateur art clubs and small galleries, is, I would argue, one of the most ensouled forms of art, and one that continually speaks to us of our profound human spiritual need for a meditative quiet place to ponder our brief time here on earth before we are interred in its folds. And yes, time, that familiar stranger that fools us into thinking that we are in command of it forever, is equally a gift of art. A photograph freezes time, but a painting can warm up eternity and allow us to enter it, however briefly, over and over again. And souled art speaks to us, to our yearning for eternity in a moment. No matter how many times you gaze on it, art can, like a mirror, fill us with hope. Our souls are tossed by the turmoil of our world and by the tragedies in our lives. There is nothing new to this litany of sorrows, except that they are available to us now in an avalanche of imagery manufactured for our morbid titillation and entertainment, delivered on iPad, iPhone, and TV. The challenge to art is to lift us above this barrage of brutality and allow us to see God's face. That, for me, is the soul of art. Thank you.
Very much, Rachel. What an extraordinary contrast that we've had, that wonderful sense of body and the image and how we work through those images, and then that beautiful essay on art itself. So we're open now to questions. So we can have a question that is a comment. This is also being filmed, so we will need you to use this diabolical piece of equipment. Professor Matthew. So do we have some questions or some comments that have emanated from that and that you would like either Rod or Rachel to comment on or to answer for you? Right down. Heaving a sigh of relief here. Father Chris.
I'd be interested in some comments on abstract art, in both regard to body, so even with the Jackson Pollock and the spattered canvas and the really abstract art. It's saying something that fits in with Rachel's comment on the soul.
Rachel was talking about Piet Mondrian, so yes, the wonderful distillation of ideas.
Yeah.
Would either of you like to comment on that? Jump Rod. No, this one, you can come. That's the road.
Well, I'm just conscious that abstract art has a cultural context. At the turn of the century 1900s, there was a rise of interest in abstract art because there was also a rise of interest in the cultural horizon of the future. Lots of interesting religious ideas in Europe. And Kandinsky is famous for opening that up, that if you look deeper, you don't see representation, you see abstraction, the pure mediation of the future that was coming and sort of filled with hope. So it's an impulse towards freedom. Abstraction is wanting to tear apart the way you normally see things in a deeper way. So it's a conundrum, because abstraction, of course, isn't clear. So it's that sort of disclarity. The other period of the rise of abstraction in the 1960s with Jackson Pollock, and in that cultural context, that was the period of McCarthyism in the United States. It was the most socially repressive period in US history. But what were artists doing? They were trying to break that apart and express some fundamental gesture about the nature of the human spirit. To draw a line is an act of freedom. To make a mark is an expression of one's uniqueness and independence. So there are those impulses, and abstractionism tends to come in and out of popularity. And I just wonder whether, if you put it into that cultural context, it's also a fundamental religious expression of individuality, which is to be unique. It's not the same as everybody else. So sometimes in cultural periods, it's a calling out for the celebration of our difference.
One of the issues, of course, and particularly since that was the third faux pas, and particularly since tonight we're talking religious art, how does our community then, and I'm talking particularly our religious community, us, how do we then respond also to artists? It's a rare event in a new church in the 21st century where artists will be commissioned to express the transcendent. Our parish at Bateman is a notable exception. We have 3 extraordinary works there by Robert Juniper, a living treasure in this state. But how do we, as church, as community, how do we reach out and ask for artists who we have heard about tonight to express what we would really like to be drawn towards in terms of the sacred, in terms of that transcendent understanding? That was a comment. Now we've got another question. Rachel's got a comment.
I could actually just add a little bit to this. I think abstract art, in particular Montreal and Rothko, and particularly Rothko, were very interested. Look, I'm not an art historian, so what I know is very patchy. So I shall always defer to Rod. But that sense of trying to get at the essence and purity of existence, and that's why the organic was considered quite profane. And there's an incredible reach for the transcendent in that early abstract art. But I'd just like to make also a little bit of connection to the Kabbalah being the mystical Jewish tradition, has the different aspects of it. The philosophical Kabbalah has very strong theories about, well, because it's a major book, the Zohar begins with colors, and each color has a very strong philosophical, theological dimension. And so one of the great contemporary artists, Janet Lawrence, working in Sydney, produced these quite extraordinary colored glass panes in a new synagogue in Sydney, now 10 years ago, probably now, based on the Kabbalistic notions. And it saddens me very often that many people would walk in and think, oh, nice colors, okay, it's pretty good, kind of different. But how sad when they don't know the narrative, when they don't know its manifest, extraordinary, transcendent theological meaning, the depth of meaning of these colors. And I guess that's what I'm sad about when I see the drifting away of these deeper meanings that can so enrich one's experience of art. You always know when you've learned something extra about a painting or some sculpture, that it just suddenly, sends shivers down because it has such a depth of meaning, and how easily we can all just walk by something, what's that, and don't bother to find out. So even abstract art has its deep and profound narratives.
So do we have another question from the floor? Comment? Yes? Rod.
Thank you. My question is I guess, is all art religious in a sense? That an artist, I'm sure, paints with their soul and heart. And you were saying that the soul is the image of God imprinted within. I think you said that. My quandary is, and it picks up a little bit on what you're saying, in a society that has essentially killed God.
Essentially what?
In a society that has essentially killed God, God is dead. I remember hearing someone talk an art saying to me that, religious art was, the tradition of art comes out of religion in a sense, especially Christian art, through the centuries. And when we, in the 19th century, the philosophers and so forth started killing off God, art had to turn in on another subject, and that subject is, who am I? And when I came tonight and I saw art, body and soul, I was thinking to myself of the art of body, which has led to self-mutilation and even the death of some artists. And it's led to immense, I think, anxiety, the expression of anxiety. Rothko killed himself eventually. What is this? What are artists who do not have a faith in God painting for us today? What are they trying? What is the soul they're painting?
I think I'd probably take a less romantic view than Rachel about the role of the artist. Maybe I hang around art studios too much. The thing I would like to say in response to that is probably to ignore your question and go somewhere else. It's a privilege of standing out the front. What I value about artists is that they help me see. So it's a really technical, ethical, moral issue that I find myself blind to the world I'm living in. It might be blind to wonder, or it might be just blind to injustice. And until I have that moment of seeing, oh my goodness, I have ignored, or have not in fact seen the evidence in front of me. And because artists are visual people, I really value the capacity to help me see again the world in which I live and my responsibilities as an ethical, moral or spiritual person. And particularly because I see a lot of contemporary art, while it may not spiritually uplift me, my prime piece of information, they're really helping me think harder and deeper about what it is to be a person of responsibility in the world in which I live. That may inspire me, that may make me feel sad, that may shock me, but at least those things then move me into a position where I exercise my freedom to act and to think and believe. So I don't get too fussed about whether an artist offends me or not. Just want to know what I do with that information. That's my responsibility. So I don't like to elevate artists being too romantic, too offensive. I just think it's my role as a person in the culture I live today to think and to look really clearly about the things that I'm being sold by the media, by religious leaders or political leaders. I need to exercise my freedom as a person, and I really value when an artist breaks through the plastic stuff I get in the media all the time and helps me think more clearly. So it's probably that breaking open and honesty is for me a higher value than probably so.
She's not listening.
No. I have this big problem. It probably comes from being Jewish. And that is that you question stuff all the time. Not that other people don't, but it's one of my obsessions. And I've been in the field of religion and religious studies all my life. But one thing that I have never felt the need to do is to say that all religion's great.
Amen.
Therefore, I can also say not all art is great. I can also say that there are some religious leaders who are true to their calling and true to their faith and true to even the smallest aspect of their tradition. And there are those that are not, that are fraudulent, that are false, that are misleading to themselves and to others. We say that about politicians, we say that about writers, we say that about media people, journalists. We should also be able to say that about artists. I don't believe that artists, by simply doing their work, are in some way religious. Because if that were the case, then everything and everyone doing anything is religious. And that may be the case if you decide to define religion as that, as human experience. And I know that there are ways you can do that, and some people would argue that. But I'm for something else. I'm for being able to distinguish, to judge. I actually do believe that you can judge. After all, I'm here as a Mandorla judge. And in my favorite field of music, my heart breaks very often when I have to hear competitions and hear that someone's work is being judged. It does break my heart because I know that those musicians have worked so hard and they're being compared to one another like those Olympian swimmers who are 1,000th of a second apart. You know, how ridiculous is that? It is crazy. We do live in a world that requires us to judge in some ways, but not in others. Why not? Why not? We have to be strong enough to judge and to say when something's good, when something's bad, when the message is uplifting, when it is killing. I know historically there are things that are horribly unacceptable, including the Rwandan massacres. Nothing will ever, ever make me gaze on that and say there was something good in it. The only thing that's good in it is that some people emerged and lived and were able to live meaningful lives. And even then I doubt that there were many who could have survived that. So, Rod, I know you just died to say something.